Good morning, everybody. Is the current state of our probation and parole system broken? Sawyer County Judge John Yackel is here to talk to us about that and much, much more today, May 27th, 2021. I'm Ben Dryden, and you are watching DrydenWire Live. But let's get right to it. Please help me welcome back, I think now for the fifth time, you're a five-timer, Sawyer County Judge John Yackel. John, good morning, and congratulations on your election last month.
Thank you, Ben. Ben, good morning. Yes, I was reelected to another term as Sawyer County Circuit Judge back in April, and I'll start my second term on August 1st.
Did you have anyone running against you for this one?
No, I was running unopposed in Sawyer County.
Winning by default. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't win anything.
It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, thank you. And it was kind of a trip. I put on our website yesterday, or last night, just announcing that you're going to be on. And I went back to look to see how many times you've been on. I took some screenshots and some links back to those old shows. And that first one, because you were one of our first guests back in 2017, and that's when you came to the studio, and we had these junky microphones, a $70 webcam, and we're sitting on this round table that wasn't even tall enough, so we would just put 2x4s underneath it. Oh, it was kind of a trip to see how far it's, in the 4 years now. Now, everything's remotely done. We've got like a weird green screen behind. It's awesome. So, but it has been the advancement
of technology.
Yeah, no kidding. But it has been a year since you have been on last. So before we get into anything, how have you been?
What a year it's been.
Right. So how's that worked out for you?
Well, we've had a lot of changes and disruptions in the court system over the last year, like everybody else has experienced. And we've weathered through it as best we can, like everyone else.
That's it? That's your synopsis of the last year in your life?
Want me to get into some detail as to what we've done?
Well, we get to that stuff. But I mean, how about you? I don't know. What's new in your life?
Well, there have been some big changes, I guess, professionally. Obviously, I'm looking forward to a second term here as a circuit judge and following up with some of the things that we've accomplished in my first term. I think the biggest news locally is that, as I've talked about on your show in the past, it has been about a 4-year struggle now to get a second judge for Sawyer County. We have Sawyer County for the last 6-7 years running has been the number one busiest court system in the entire state. The court system, myself and other individuals, we have lobbied Madison to try and get them to pass a bill to creating new judgeships within the state. Mm-hmm. That was passed in March of 2020. And Governor Evers signed that bill right before all the COVID stuff broke. And but that wasn't enough to give Sawyer County a second judge. The county board had to follow through on it in creating the necessary space to house a second judge. And obviously that is a huge expenditure that a lot of good people spent a lot of time very carefully contemplating. And in February, with the guidance of the county administrator and some leaders on the county board, it was passed. And Sawyer County is now starting to build and connect the current courthouse with the current jail. So no longer we'll have prisoners walking back and forth out in broad daylight across the street. So It's a great plan moving forward. I think it's a 75 year plan that really is going to impact the county for a long time in a positive way.
Sure. So for people who don't know, in Sawyer County, that's how it is. You have the jail, you're right next to each other, right? The jail and the courthouse.
Correct.
But there's, a road in between. It's not joined together.
Correct.
So how are they joining it? Is it like a little skyway type thing?
The city, the county and the city came into an agreement. The city is building an extension on a road on county land, and in return, they gave 5th Street, the road between the two buildings, to the county, so that the county could shut down that road and build.
So again, it won't be a road there anymore. It's just they're just going to build something in the middle, another building to join everything, right?
5th Street between Kansas and Maine will be closed.
And when is that going to be? Has it already started? I haven't been to Sawyer County in like a year and a half because COVID.
The actual construction on the courthouse has not begun yet. The planning has.
Sure.
They're starting to extend that one road. The city is. That needs to be done before they close 5th Street. So the expected start date for the new judge under the law it will be August 1st, 2023. So we still got a long time before
2 years. That's
Sawyer
it.
County
I mean,
gets the benefit of having a second judge.
sure, but that's that's obviously So you also needed that, right, for a second courtroom. Wasn't that also part of this, or no?
Right. We the small courtroom the state would not allow us to use for a second judge.
Sure.
They said if you're going to keep that small courtroom in place, we're not going to give you a second judge.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's kind of
you need another courtroom the same size as the current one. A new one is the same size as the current one.
All right. So when is that? Obviously, that'll be finished before August of 2023, right? That's kind of the goal.
It'll be completed right around that time.
Oh, so nice, perfect timing.
So, yeah, so it's a huge day in Sawyer County.
Yeah.
A real big change. We've been a single judge for, obviously since we were created, but we've needed this for a long time, and a lot of people came together to get this done. So
now what are you going to do? In August of 2023, there's another judge. Now what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to have tons of free time, man.
No, believe me, that's not the case. We have, most of my time is spent on the bench and in my office getting paperwork done. But there are so many other things that we need to do. We need to create diversion programs, drug courts, and really start addressing some of the huge drug problems we have here. And I guess that leads into another thing that I'd like to talk about here. During the COVID epidemic, everyone's run around for the last year talking about masks, limited capacities, judges or governors' mandates, social distancing, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that we haven't talked about is the explosion of meth and heroin. It was bad a year ago, and I've never seen anything like this in its present state. For the federal government, the state government, they've given handouts, bailouts, and just money out to individuals. You might have gotten a check from the government.
Yes, I did.
There you go. The sad thing about it is that obviously that money was meant for the right purposes, for good purposes. But when you give $1,400 to a meth or heroin addict, that doesn't go to buy groceries. That doesn't go to put gas in the car to get your kid to school. It goes to drugs.
I never thought about that.
And there has been a tremendous flood of federal money into our county that's being distributed or given to individuals who are drug addicts. And it has just exploded beyond belief.
I've never heard anyone even state that or suggest that or say, by the way, if we're starting to see those things go up, Fitzy and I talk about drug epidemic and the meth in Barron County all the time. Man, I've never even heard that, and I don't know why I didn't even think about it. So do you think that is a direct correlation, or that in conjunction with the fact that there's a lot of people that maybe lost their jobs, or you have to stay at home and they can't really go anywhere, so it's, I guess we'll just do meth.
I'm here to point out the effect. I'm not a legislator, so I'm not going to be the one to say how we should set it up. But sure. When you give money to somebody who's fallen on tough times over COVID, lost their jobs, struggling to pay their bills, obviously that's what that money was intended to do. To help those people get through this. Mm-hmm. But when you have that money and you're not careful as to who you're giving it to, you give it to a full-blown drug user, that money is going to be used for drugs. Somebody could come on here and argue with me about whether or not that's the case. I just ask everybody to use their own logic on it. So,
right. Yeah. So speaking of the mask, all the orders and stuff, so you were actually a part of that, and I think that was during or after the last time that you were on, about a year ago. For anyone who doesn't know, quickly, can you state what role you played in this?
On October 8th, I believe it was. Well, first of all, we had that the governor's order back in, I believe it started in March. And then there was the Andrea Palm decision. That was the name of the case, the Palm decision out of the Supreme Court, which I think by the majority basically said that the what was it? The shutdowns. They just ruled that the governor's Health and Human Services didn't properly promulgate the rule through the state legislature. So what does that mean? Well, so we went through the summer and the fall, and of course there was a lot of squabbling between the Health and Human Services, the governor, the legislature, and on October 8th, the Department of Health and Human Services created this rule. I think it was rule number 3, that emergency order number 3, that basically limited the capacity of public restaurants to 25%. And the state legislature said, okay, under the Palm decision, you have to come to us. We have to talk about this. We have to promulgate a rule going forward so that the people's elected body has input on what this rule is, and then we have to implement it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a dictate by the Department of Health and Human Services. And the Palm decision laid out fairly clearly, in my opinion, what the governor and the Department of Health and Human Services has to do. And so what happened is that the Tavern League claimed that Andrea Palm did not follow the requirements of the Palm decision. They filed a temporary restraining order, an ex parte restraining order, asking for an immediate blockage of implementation of that 25%. They basically said, if we're limited to 25%, our businesses are going to go under.
Right.
And so they filed it in Sawyer County. I took a look at it, spent one evening into the wee hours of the morning looking at that. I signed the ex parte order and set it for a hearing within 5 days, I think the rule is. But within that 5 days, they gave it to another judge.
And
they have the right under the statute to substitute judges. So it's like, so when people start saying, oh, we're going to go forum shopping for different judges, that takes place. Mm-hmm. It was given to another judge. That judge held the hearing at the time that I scheduled it. He looked at it differently than I did. So it was on a Wednesday morning. I signed the ex parte order. Another judge overturned me on Monday. And then of that same week on Friday, there was an emergency appeal filed, and the Court of Appeals overturned that judge and reinstituted or re-implemented my order, blocking the governor's implementation of this. And then eventually it was appealed to the Supreme Court. And not too long ago, the Supreme Court upheld the Court of Appeals upholding my original decision.
Yeah, it was right after I think it was that following week after the third judge. At that point, like I was updating, stories on DrydenWire about this, and I was even reading, going, okay, so that reversed that one. Like I don't even know. Is it 25% still? I'm like, I'm not really sure. Yep. It just kind of got really weird there for a while. So
the order was implemented. I stopped it. Another judge implemented it. Then the Court of Appeals stopped it. And then the Supreme Court basically said the Court of Appeals was right. Things move quick. I mean, I'll tell you what, we've seen a lot of things in the last year that I haven't ever seen before. So, and I implemented what I felt the law was under the Palm decision and applying the facts to that. And it had nothing to do with whether or not I thought it was a good idea to have a 25% limited capacity or not, whether that's good or not. It was, you didn't follow the rules according to the Supreme Court's order in the Palm decision. And it was as simple as that. I got death threats from all across the country on that. I got a body bag sent to me.
Shut up.
I mean, I can't imagine some of these judges on a much higher profile level than I am, the abuse that they take, because I took quite a bit of it. So it was,
how much is a body bag? I'm just saying that's a commitment right there.
It was sent from Amazon. They ordered it on Amazon, sent it, and they sent a nice little message in it. And they said, I hope you die, and I hope that your family dies of COVID. And I'm like, well, I must have touched a nerve. I mean, it wasn't my intention to.
Well, on the flip side, I'm pretty sure you have free meals for life for every restaurant in Sawyer County.
Unfortunately, I can't take those. That would be unethical. So, like I said, it has nothing to do with whether or not I liked the order or I didn't like the order. It was I applied the law, to the facts to the law as it was written in the Palm decision, and that's the outcome. And apparently, the Supreme Court agreed with me. So,
well, that's reassuring. That's the part I think a lot of people, I know I certainly struggle with when you see what you just said. You applied the law as, and I get that people see it maybe a little bit differently, but boy, it's just interesting how some people can just see it wildly differently. But if you're just applying it shouldn't be that difficult. But I don't know how that job works. Well, maybe it is significantly, just crazy difficult.
We're human. We're human. So when you become emotional about it, and guess what? Over the last year, you know as well as I do that people have expressed extreme emotions one way or the other about what's happening. And if you let that get into your decision making, well, and if you're deathly afraid of COVID and your family members you're afraid that grandma's going to die from COVID, well, that can seep its way into
your subconscious, maybe.
Well, your subconscious. And, I believe that Governor Evers and Andrea Palm were, in their own way, trying to do the right thing from their point of view. I don't think that they were trying to limit the 25% capacity just because they wanted to squash those restaurants.
Right.
I think they were trying to do the right thing, but that doesn't change. I think the best thing I've ever read was Justice Bradley's concurring opinion in one of the recent decisions. She basically said, you have a constitution, and if we're going to throw the Constitution out the window in a crisis, what's the point of having a Constitution? The Constitution survives no matter if we have an epidemic, if we have a war. That is the law of the land. That is what we need to follow, and you can't subvert that simply because you're trying to do the right thing.
Well, we can try, I guess. We did.
Well,
so
you shouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there will always be judges in place to block it.
Yeah. So let's get to what we kind of talked at the very beginning.
Sure.
Is probation and parole system, is it broken or not? I had a brief chat with you via message about this, so I don't really know what this is about. Obviously, I mean, I know it's about probation and the parole system, but where we are now. So what is this about? Why do you want to talk about this?
Let me just explain what the probation parole system is. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people out there that have preconceived notions or no notions at all about how our legal system works. I mean, it's a complex system. Mm-hmm. I've been an attorney for 20 years. I've been on the bench for 6 years. And, I still learn every day as how the system interacts and how it responds to things. And so I can imagine, it's difficult to imagine, but I can imagine how somebody who has no legal training or background looks at this system and goes, what's happening? I'm not really sure what's happening. Mm-hmm. So the Probation and Parole Department is a state agency that is created under the Department of Corrections. And who controls the Department of Corrections? Well, it's a cabinet position. And the current secretary of the Department of Corrections is Secretary Kevin Carr, C-A-R-R. He is a cabinet position under the Evers administration. And so he obviously takes direction from the governor. He's in control of his agency, and then they run it. So when Scott Walker was governor, he had a secretary of the Department of Corrections. Okay. So the Department of Corrections has a large budget. They're in charge of taking care of the prisons, of the reform, rehabilitation, and probation and parole. And so I'm going to be just like everybody else in our community. What is probation? Well, to me, probation is something that, hey, if you commit a crime and you want a second chance, and we're not going to send you to prison, and we're not going to send you to jail. We're going to put you on probation so that you can show us that you can follow the law, not break the law. If you've got mental health issues, you're going to get those addressed so that you can start getting treatment. If you have drug addiction issues, you're going to start getting treatment so you can get yourself off drugs.
So
sense,
real quick,
right?
hold on. Yeah. So use me like as an example. So I get arrested, which is likely, I suppose, at some point. Yep. Kidding, but I don't know what marijuana. That's my favorite topic in the world anyway, because that gets people fired up.
Don't use marijuana because in today's world, I see people posting on your Facebook page that, well, in Wisconsin, they're going to go to prison for marijuana. I've never sent anyone to prison for a THC crime. I mean, it's just not part of the landscape.
Yeah. All right. So what am I arrested for?
THC is involved, but that's not the underlying crime.
All right. So what am I arrested for in this scenario?
Possession of methamphetamine.
Got it.
You had a stressful couple of years. COVID was tough on you, Ben.
I got money from the government, so hey, screw it.
Wrong people, you're taking meth.
Right. Got it.
Okay, and you get caught by the police, and you have a small amount of meth, and you're a meth addict. Well, the law doesn't allow us to send you to prison, or it puts a lot of stopgap measures in place to prevent us from sending you to prison. The system does not want a judge to send Ben Dryden, who has only been convicted of a possession of methamphetamine, who is a drug user but not a drug dealer, they don't want us to send you to prison. And I think that that's reasonable, because there are a lot of people who use illegal substances and then like, no, this isn't for me. And then most of them get addicted to it and they can't stop.
Sure.
And even if they want to stop, they can't stop. So let's try and get them reformed. Let's try and get them some drug treatment so that they can stop taking methamphetamine, rather than housing somebody down in prison to the tune of $100,000 a year.
And where does probation come into this?
Community-based reform. What?
Where does probation come into this? So I get arrested by a cop and I go in front of a judge.
When they come to court, they make a deal with the DA, and the deal is for 3 years probation, let's say.
Sure.
Okay? So I place them on probation, and on 3 years of probation. I withhold their sentence. I place them on probation. So that means if they screw up on probation, they come back to me for sentencing. And then at that point, I can send them to prison. So it's kind of like, well, instead of sentencing you to prison now, we're going to give you a chance on probation to get off drugs.
Get this figured out, right?
Get it figured out. Get your life squared away.
Sure.
And probation parole is charged with making sure that they get that reform and getting things all straightened out, that they follow the law.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as a member of the public, you would think, all right, if somebody is on probation, they check in with their probation agent. They go through a long list of things that they need to do, go to your treatment, check in, do your analysis to make sure you're not taking drugs. Okay. And if you are taking drugs, that's not an automatic revocation. And the word revocation means that your probation is taken away. So if I'm using a word that people, so that's revoked, revocation, revoked.
Sure.
So they go on probation, and you would think that if somebody goes out and continues to use drugs, doesn't check in with their probation agent, is committing other crimes, that you would think that they would be revoked off of probation and they would come back to the court for sentencing.
Well, hold on, stop right there.
Yep.
So for that first part, and I don't want to get into this because that'd be too long. Just about the fact
it's
that you could redo
so I want you to help me explain it.
Yeah. So the if you don't go and see your I don't know, whatever the frequency is, let's say a month, or if you just, I would assume that like almost immediately should be either. Boy, that's dangerously close to, okay, you need to come back, because that's serious. Like, you have to be in touch with your probation agent, right? But you can go, you're saying that sometimes they just don't even go? Like, who follows up with that?
Probation agents. I mean, listen, the local probation agents here in the community are great people who have, they're like everybody else in the state. They're underfunded. They have too many cases. They can't follow through on all of them, and they're just taking their dictates from Madison. So you change administrations, you change the rules. We are not the probation parole are not revoking people because they continue to use drugs or they're dealing drugs. I think it's called the violation matrix that comes from Madison and this Secretary Kevin Carr. And so in order to get somebody revoked off of probation, they have to, I'm not a probation agent. All I know as a judge, when I'm sitting there and this person has been revoked off of probation and is sitting before me, I have what's known as a revocation packet. And that is from the probation agent, and it lists all of the violations that this person has had while they're on probation.
Okay.
And it's page after page after page of when they were, well, we're getting into something here, because they used to test them for drugs. Oh yeah, this person has failed a urinalysis. They're still using. They've got caught with more drugs. And so page after page after page, they absconded for 6 months. They didn't report in for their probation agent, and they're still on probation. They're not revoked. It's an amazing system that the public should be aware of, that is completely out of the hands of lawyers, DAs, judges, police officers. There's this whole state agency of probation and parole that if I place them on probation, I have expectations as to what they're going to do on probation, and those expectations are not being filled. And it's like, and I'm shocked at how little supervision there is. I'm just trying to get the word out to the public that they should be taking a closer look at what probation and parole is on the state level and start asking some questions of their legislators, their governor, these administrative secretaries like Kevin Carr, and what are we doing about this?
Yeah.
There's a huge issue of drugs out there. Don't get me wrong. And not everybody who is using drugs should go to prison, but you have expectations of what probation means. And it took me 6 years as being a judge to realize that my expectations of what should happen on probation are so far from what's actually happening.
In the 6 years, have you noticed something just more recently, or I'm just now looking back and starting to piece it together, and I think this was here the whole time? I think it's been quote unquote broken for ever since I've been here. I just didn't really put all the pieces together before, or is there something more recent that is just kind of going that was the proverbial straw for you?
If it was broken, it's more broken.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If it was broken, it's more broken now, because in the last year with COVID, so probation and parole throughout the state does not even test anybody who is a drug addict, who is on a probation. Okay. So Ben Dryden is put on probation. He's a meth user. He checks in with his probation agent. There's no follow through to see what kind of mental health or drug treatment you're getting. There's no drug testing to see whether or not you're actually staying off of drugs. That they used to do that, but not anymore.
Because why?
Well, they're using COVID as the excuse. But was that ever communicated to the public? I, as a judge, was never informed by probation and parole that all of a sudden, hey, judge, just so you know, when you're placing people on probation now, they're not testing them anymore. And so they could go out there, continue to use, and just check in with a probation agent. And what have we accomplished at the end of the 3 years probation? We just have another drug addict who hasn't gotten any treatment and who's still a drug addict. And then, of course, there's people out there that say, well, just send them to prison. Well, if you want to do that, then you better tell your state legislators to build more prisons and open your wallet for more tax dollars. Because either way, whether we give everybody treatment, we send everybody to prison, we're not paying enough for either one of them right now. And, as a judge, I'm a human being. And I see somebody in court who is a drug user, a drug dealer, and they basically give the middle finger to society and to the system. I don't have a lot of sympathy for them. But there's lots of people that come through there who are drug users who are trying to get off of drugs, and there's just no effective way to get off meth and heroin. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think in a smaller community like the Sawyer County, all of ours, at least our coverage area,
sure.
If you're not being held accountable for any of these things, you don't even go and do your drug testing or really check in, et cetera, whatever, I'm assuming, like anything, like I know Cubs fans in our area because it's a small area and I like the Cubs and I see, hey, Cubs. And next thing you know, I know a whole bunch of people that like the Cubs. A lot of these people that do drugs, I'm assuming they know a lot of other people that do drugs. So it kind of gets like spread word of mouth. Don't worry about it. They don't care.
Oh, absolutely. The DA has settled so many cases in the last year because so many people are saying, yeah, I'll take probation.
Right.
And I've even asked the DA in certain cases, I said, how confident are you that probation and parole is going to successfully and monitor this person appropriately? And, that's really beyond his control. And so my job isn't here to fix the system. I can't fix probation and parole. That's an executive function.
Sure.
But I certainly, as a judge, can tell the people in my community what I see from my perspective as to what's happening.
Yeah. And quickly here, so it's probation and parole system are you seeing any issues or concerns with paroles, or is that just more the umbrella?
Here's the difference. Probation is somebody who hasn't been sent to prison, okay? They're put on probation rather than going to prison. Somebody who goes to prison gets a sentence of 3 years in, 3 out. So that 3 years out is known as extended supervision. That's parole. So when you get released from prison, there's a couple of years where you still have to check in with the probation agent. So it's just like being on probation, pretty much.
Sure.
But there's it's just a different different aspect as to where you are in the whole system.
It's like the bookends of
That's
this
right.
whole
That's
thing.
right. One is before, one is after. They both get monitored. They both check in, and both are difficult. I mean, you obviously want, if the people are coming out of prison, you want them to be monitored so that they don't slip back into their old ways. If you got somebody on probation, you want to make sure that when they're sitting in front of the judge going, "Oh, give me a chance, please. I'm going to be successful on probation," that you don't want somebody who after 3 years of probation is a bigger addict than they were when they were sentenced, or when they were put on probation. And it's just a system that is, I think, if we shed more light on it, if people became more aware of how it happened, and there was some accountability to the public, I think the public would demand some changes. I don't know what the answers are. I'm as a judge using treatment. I'm using prison, I'm using jail, I'm using probation to try and get people. Because if I send them to prison for 3 years or 5 years or 8 years, they're going to get out. I want to make sure that when they get out, they're not drug users again. I want them to be cured or reformed, so that we don't have to deal with them again, because we keep getting a rollover in the system here of people who are drug users, and it just keeps building and building and building, and that's what's putting a tremendous pressure on the criminal justice system, court system, law enforcement. The amounts of drugs coming through here right now from the Twin Cities, from Milwaukee, Eau Claire, it's just a tremendous amount. I mean, I think we had somebody this week stopped in Hayward on their way to Ashland with 271 grams of heroin. That's 17 ounces. And that is a Class C felony with a maximum penalty, 40 years in prison. Tremendous amounts. It's all over, and people aren't getting helped.
Hey,
and probation and parole, which we thought was helping, doesn't seem to be. I was told by somebody, one of the directors yesterday, that basically said, well, they're not going to start testing until July. And I'm just like, well, why haven't we been informed of this as judges?
Sure.
Because we've relied on this system.
Right.
So
we just assume that if we, here's all your conditions for your probation, that those conditions are going to be followed up on and they're going to be held accountable for those.
I just want to be clear. The local people who are doing their jobs are underfunded, understaffed. They're struggling and doing the best that they get with these edicts from Madison and the policy direction. Yeah. So don't go beating them up. I'm talking this to the public. Don't go. Ask questions, definitely. Ask questions. Ask them to explain. Ask them to explain what policy decisions are coming from Madison. But there needs to be light that's shed upon the system here, because from my point of view, it's a system that I was surprised to find out wasn't even close to assisting me in doing the work that I do. Yeah. In accomplishing that.
Obviously that's politics, government, crime, and court. That's kind of our bread and butter with DrydenWire. It has been since we started, and that was one of the reasons that we started it. And I write all these things, and obviously I'm putting in all here, the conditions, probation, withheld sentence, and all that. I honestly just assumed, okay, that's all gonna, that's all going to happen, or they're going to, go to prison. That's crazy.
Yeah, here's might be what part of the reason why, because when they come back to me for sentencing after they have been revoked from probation, I'm given that revocation packet, and I told you all the lists of all the violations that they created. Those are confidential documents that aren't released to the public. So the public never sees these documents about all the long list of violations. And it's like, if it were be able to made public, people would say, why didn't they get revoked after he absconded for 6 months and didn't check in with you? Or why is he not revoked after being caught with drugs 3-4 times after he was placed on probation?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's one of those situations where, even though there may be some people, if you're on probation, that love to know, hey, I really don't have to do this or that. But I think there are, and I have no idea what percentage, I wouldn't even be able to guess, of people who do want to be held accountable, who want to get off the pipe, as it were, right? And they want to get better. But when nobody's holding them accountable, or they know they can get away with a whole bunch of things.
I want to end it with this, Ben. Because I know we're under a time limitation here. Let me just finish with this.
Okay.
You're exactly right. there are a tremendous number of people who are drug addicts that want help. I have several of them who are doing such a great job in our community. They come in to the courtroom on a weekly basis to sit and watch the cases come through because that holds them accountable. That's their way of treatment of staying sober. So we've talked to them. They're on probation for a long time, and they're the people that if all of a sudden they screw up, it's going to be a real kick to the teeth for us, because we've put so much hope into these people, and they're doing a tremendously good job. Yeah. Those are the people, the examples that we want everyone to follow.
Sure.
But now getting to my point, after long discussions with them, they agree with me that holding the people accountable is the only possible way that you're going to get a drug addict to clean up. And so what we have in Sawyer County is a pre-sentencing diversion program, or a pre-sentencing a program in which individuals who are charged with drug crimes are tested. It's called Justice Point. They're an organization out of Milwaukee that the Sawyer County has hired to do our testing. And so what happens is that if you, Ben Dryden, get charged with a possession of meth, and your case is going to take 4, 6, 8, 10 months to go through the system here, when I place you on bond, you're ordered to go to Justice Point to start getting testing and monitoring to make sure that you are being offered the treatment options in the community to try and better yourself.
Nice.
So you look surprised.
No, I said nice. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I do look surprised now I think about it, because I didn't even know of this, and I don't know if other counties have a version of that or use that as well.
My theory is this: you can get caught with meth on Saturday night. Mm-hmm. You can be in Sawyer County Court on Monday getting a bond. Because we have Justice Point, I can give them a signature bond, and we're not spending money to house them in the jail. They go check in with Justice Point that day, and now they're monitored.
Nice.
And if they violate, if they test positive, they're coming back into court, and I'm questioning them what's going on, and I can change the bond. I can put cash on them and send them back over to jail if they can't post, or just up the ante. But the whole point of it is to hold them accountable, to keep them off drugs.
Yeah.
And that's our charging, or not. It's our pre-conviction program here in Sawyer County. And I am shocked to find out that we do more on the front end as far as our testing goes than probation and parole does on the back end once they're sentenced. So you could have all this monitoring in Sawyer County on the front end. The person, because they've done a good job, can avoid prison and get probation here in Sawyer County, and then they go to probation parole, and all that supervision is gone. They're not being tested. They're not being monitored as vigorously as they are here in Sawyer County. Yeah. And it, just as you point out, there are so many people who are drug addicts that if they have that structure in place, that they're being held accountable, they can do it. They can stay off drugs. But as soon as that structure goes away, so many of them relapse, and it becomes just a nightmare. And
at that point, I think we're failing them. So
yes.
All right, man. Anything else you want to touch on?
I know we have paying a lot of money for it.
Yeah. We could talk forever about a whole bunch of different topics. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, or anything coming up this week? Have you back on maybe this fall, get an update on how those things are going there, and maybe talk more. Because actually, now that you've said these things about contacting the legislators, I'm actually going to this afternoon send some emails and just see what their opinion is on this, or if they're aware of certain things like this, and just kind of see where they are, because I may end up actually doing a little bit more on this actually. So I'm glad we talked about it. But
I've talked to some regional directors of probation pro, some of the local people, and they are good. They are concerned. They recognize it, but they are in a situation that they can only do so much. And the only thing that I want to leave here with is that this is the rule that I tell everybody. It's my own personal rule. For example, and I think that our DA is probably getting tired of hearing this. If there is a defect in the system or a deficiency, and it's not, let's say, the DA's fault, I'll ask the DA, I know it's not your fault. I know you can't control it, but are you standing up to identify it, to let the public know that it exists, to put pressure on Madison to try and change this, or to at least address the problem? Well, no. Well, then it is your problem, and it is your fault. I believe that any one of us who can identify a problem in the system, even though it's not our fault, and even though it's not directly under our control, we can point it out and say, hey, this needs to be taken care of. Same thing with the second judge. Same thing with the public defender issue that we talked about a few years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not under my control, but it's affecting us.
Yep.
And I want to bring that those problems to light. Same thing with probation and parole. There's a problem there, I think. And if the public doesn't think that there's a problem, that's fine. But I have a feeling that they don't really know what's going on. I want them to, I want some light to be shed on it. I want the public to review it closely. And if our fellow people here in Washburn County or Sawyer County think that everything is fine and that's the way it should be working, I've got no problem with that.
Sure.
But I don't think that that's the case. I don't think they really understand what's going on because it took me so long to figure out what's going on.
Well, in the last 4 times that you were on, we talked about 2 things consistently: the need for a second judge and all the reasons, and then we always talked about, or I think 3 of the 4 were about the DAs and the DAs,
meth
ADAs,
problem.
and meth and meth every
public
time.
Defender, it's
Public
the drug
defender, that was the
problem.
other one. Yeah,
It's the need for a second judge. There's other issues here that are tied in with it.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not a tax and spend kind of guy. I don't want my taxes raised, but I also believe that taxes are necessary. And so if my taxes are raised to go for a specific function, like the building of this courthouse, guess what? When my taxes go up $80 a year, I can go to that building and touch it and say, that's what I'm paying for.
yeah, that's true.
But nobody wants our taxes to go up and to say, hey, your taxes are going up.
Yeah.
And well, what are they going to be spent on? Well, some program. I talk about a lot of underfunding.
Yeah.
I want smarter funding. I want more targeted funding, and I want a review of how we're doing things so we become more efficient.
Yeah.
And we can only do that by pointing out the deficiencies in the
Right.
system.
And if you look at the whole system from beginning to end, from starting with law enforcement and the funding that they receive, and then DAs and ADAs and clerks and judges,
Yep.
you follow this on probation. You follow this all the way through. But if there is a weak link there, then and it's, well, I don't really want to spend more money, more tax money to fix that one. Well, in a weird way, then we're kind of just wasting our money and all the other stuff because it all needs to kind of work together in order for this to actually work. Otherwise, what are we doing? Right?
Yeah. And better funding sometimes doesn't mean more money.
Right.
It means a review of what's going on and cutting out the inefficiencies as to what's happening.
Brilliant.
In Sawyer County, we have increased our caseload year after year after year because of these drugs. We are so efficient in this county. We are running at a high capacity
Nice.
of efficiency to keep this problem from getting out of control and keeping the court system functioning. But you can only do that for so long until you need to add to what we're doing.
John, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate this. I always have an open door policy. I can't talk about specific cases, but I can explain, and that's why I love coming on here. I love explaining how our legal system works to people because people lead busy lives. They don't have time to study this.
Right.
I mean, it's not their choice of profession. They're business owners, they're school teachers, whatever they are. They don't always understand it because it's complex, and it's not that they can't understand it. It's just that they don't have somebody out there talking and trying to explain it to them. And that's what I think all judges throughout the state should be in this mode of trying to explain how our system works.
Yeah,
that's the only way that we're going to get the public engagement as to how to make our system better and to understand what's happening along the way. Instead of accusing me, and this is just kind of instead of accusing me of being some type of ogre that wants to see people die from COVID because I made the ruling that I did. Well, if you understood what my job is and how I'm supposed to do my job, then you'd have a better understanding that had nothing to do with it. It's simply applying the facts to the law.
And when you come on, you always walk us through it, and that's what I like about it. You dumb it down for me. Because I know I probably know more than the average person who's not in the court system or the whole
It's not
process.
dumbing it down.
But I
It's
still
just
don't know a
breaking
lot
it
of it.
apart and digesting it slowly.
Well, that's a lot nicer way of saying that I'm dumb. So, all right, special thank you to my guest today, Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice John. You know what? I think that's a typo right there. Sorry.
You said that all wrong.
No, I said that, or is that foreshadowing? I don't know. I meant to say Sawyer County Judge John Yackel, and thank all of you for watching. I'll see you right back here on Tuesday for another episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. Until then, stay safe and have a blessed day. Thanks, John.